Alright, let's see if we can get everything looking in there. I've got the horn installed that's facing downward, and as you can see, our bolt is on there. I also put, as you well know, and I put some of that grease, the dielectric grease, on the bolt too. So I've got one probe hooked up to the horn on the ground side, and we're going to go look at the connection to see if it's okay on the horn shaft, or I should say on the steering shaft, because we know a lot of guys lose ground through the steering shaft, and there it is. Okay, got it? I had to do a little sanding there and take some of that rust off, and I'll probably squirt it with a little paint here in a second. Now, a lot of guys lose ground and get those horn problems. Now, what's supposed to take place, you may not know. Back in the older cars, up through the 60s, they had a little spring metal. It was actually spring metal, like a carburetor spring, and it would go from one of these on this side, on a connecting bolt, to the other side. And it was a spring because this little donut, the rubber donut, would flex depending on the kind of car it was in, and the angle wasn't exactly straight. So that little devil had to keep flexing every time you turned a corner. And I suppose there are people who find that same problem and never knew, without taking it apart or looking at a parts book, that little spring, it's a carburetor spring, is supposed to go in there. But these don't have this. The ground is supposed to come right back through these little plates that you see, and you can find them in the parts book. So if your connections are bad in the ground, rather than just trying to go around the shaft on the inside of the cab, you might try to take these loose, clean them up, and reseal them and test from ground on this side to the chassis cab, and see if you get your ground. So I know that this horn is going to work. And let's go inside here. And one of the problems that this vehicle has is that it sits outside all the time. And when enough years go by, it softens the rubber on the horn switch. And sure enough, one day I heard a horn blowing, and it's because it was over 100 and some odd degrees inside of the cab, and it had swelled that rubber up enough that the copper plates inside of it came in contact with each other. So I used to have to unplug the horns, so that wouldn't do it, but that wouldn't stop the switch. So I would come out and put this little scrap piece of wood on top of there, and then later on I'd open this up on nice days and let her air out. But in the end, those horns went bad, and I suspect that this got real hot one day and just cooked the fuse. So, because I left one of those horns hooked up, and the fuse kept blowing, which is a little different than guys hitting the switch and not getting any horn. And I went ahead and replaced the horn relay, because this is a 1986 truck. It's very old, and why not just replace it? In fact, I had to find a boneyard piece here, thanks to Murray Park out of Ohio, his big sea-body collection. He knew who I needed to get in touch with to work this out. So let's go ahead and test the horn. Well, sounds like my switch might have a little issue. There we go. Yeah, that works. Good enough to get through inspection. All right. So the horns are in. And the next thing I'll do is look at this grill. And I think for those of you who need to do a little extra work on nice stuff, we will see that then.